After my father's death, my stepmother threw me out of our home, but 5 years later, she would tremble in fear hearing my voice while she lay sleeping. The Smith family mansion stood there, majestic and proud, a testament to wealth and success that my father had built from nothing. My father, Brian Smith, was a renowned real estate businessman who spent long hours in his office, analyzing contracts and closing deals with unwavering dedication. I remember how his wealth grew day by day, and how proud he was to be one of the most influential men in town, though he never let it change his humble nature. As his daughter, I held him in the highest regard, watching him work with admiration in my heart, dreaming of the day I would follow in his footsteps. I can still picture those moments in his office, watching him review important documents, my heart swelling with pride and admiration as I thought to myself how incredible he was, building everything from scratch while maintaining his integrity throughout it all. The gleam of his reading glasses, the methodical way he reviewed each paper, the gentle smile he'd give me when he caught me watching, these memories are etched into my heart forever. Every time I watched him, I would silently promise myself that one day, I would become just like him, carrying on his legacy with the same dedication and honesty that he showed every single day. I never imagined then how differently things would turn out, or how hard I would have to fight to keep that promise.
As Brian Smith turned 50, the weight of time began to cast its shadow over his once boundless energy. In the grand estate that had witnessed his rise to success, he found himself battling an unfamiliar weariness that clung to him like an unwelcome companion. His reflection in the mahogany-framed mirror of his study showed a man still commanding respect, yet touched by the subtle marks of aging that no amount of wealth could forestall. "I need more rest," he whispered to himself, his voice carrying the weight of responsibility. "Natalie needs me for many more years to come." His thoughts constantly revolved around the future of his family, especially his beloved daughter, Natalie. Lurking in the shadows of this family drama was Amber, his second wife, a woman driven by deep ambition. Her marriage to Brian was a carefully orchestrated performance, a dance of affection masking her true desire for financial security. From the shadows of the grand mansion, she watched Brian with calculated precision, planning her next move. Her cold eyes followed his every move, pondering how her life would change if something were to happen to him. "Brian is generous," she mused, her perfectly manicured nails drumming against the leather armrest, "but he won't leave everything to me. I must secure my future." As Brian's health continued its subtle decline, he made the fateful decision to prepare his will. One evening, in the hushed sanctuary of their living room, where the antique grandfather clock marked time with solemn precision, Brian broached the subject with Amber. "Amber," he said, his voice steady despite his weakening constitution, "we need to discuss the future. I plan to leave you a portion of my estate, but Natalie will be the primary heir." The room fell silent, with the sound of the clock softly echoing. Amber's face remained a masterpiece of deception, her smile as carefully crafted as a porcelain mask. "Dearest Brian," she replied, her voice dripping with honeyed insincerity, "you know what's best for our family." But beneath her perfectly composed exterior, her mind raced with desperate calculation. "A portion? I want it all. I must find that will." Later that night, while Brian slept, Amber prowled through the mansion like a thief in her own home. "It must be hidden somewhere safe," she whispered to herself, her fingers trailing across leather-bound books and mahogany drawers. She searched every conceivable hiding place, from the antique desk drawers to the wall safes hidden behind priceless artwork. Yet Brian, ever cautious, had played his own game of strategy, constantly changing the location of important documents, staying one step ahead of her desperate search.
Even though I was young, I began to sense the growing tension in our family's atmosphere. I loved my father deeply and tried to respect Amber, but something felt terribly wrong in our once peaceful home. I couldn't help but notice Amber's peculiar obsession with my father's documents, how she would rummage through his things whenever he wasn't around, like a detective searching for hidden clues. The way she prowled through his office made my stomach churn with worry and suspicion. My father must have sensed my growing anxiety, because one evening, he pulled me into one of those warm, protective embraces that only a loving father can give. His words still echo in my memory. He assured me that I had nothing to worry about, that he would always protect me. Looking back now, I can still feel the safety of that moment, his strong arms around me, the familiar scent of his aftershave, and the absolute certainty in his voice. If only I had known then how those words would haunt me in the years to come.
Brian Smith's health continued to decline, casting long shadows across the once vibrant halls of his magnificent estate, as the inevitable whispers of mortality grew louder with each passing day. One particularly difficult night, when weakness seemed to seep into his very bones, he made the fateful decision to draft his final will. In the dim light of his study, where success had once seemed eternal, Brian's determined eyes reflected an unwavering resolve as he contemplated his daughter's future. With trembling hands that betrayed his failing strength, yet guided by an iron will, he carefully penned a document that would secure Natalie's inheritance while ensuring Amber received her fair portion. His signature, though slightly unsteady, marked the paper with the same authority that had built his empire. With the precious document complete, he secretly stored it in the safe hidden behind an elegant oil painting in his office, a final act of protection for his beloved daughter's future. But Amber, driven by an insatiable hunger for wealth, finally discovered the will during one of Brian's deep slumbers. Her emerald eyes gleamed with triumph in the moonlight as she held the document that would change everything. With precision and cold calculation, she carefully altered the contents of the will, ensuring that the majority of the estate would seamlessly fall into her well-manicured hands. As she returned the forged document to its original hiding place, she whispered false words of regret to Brian, though her heart felt no remorse.
I spent more time with my father during those final days, treasuring every precious moment we had together. One afternoon, as I sat beside him in our garden, I asked him if he remembered the times when Mom was still with us, those beautiful days when we were so happy. Despite his growing weakness, Dad managed to smile, his eyes glistening with tears as he spoke about my mother Crystal. He told me what a wonderful woman she was, how she always knew exactly how to bring joy into our lives. In that moment, memories gently washed over her, the sunlit days spent in this very garden with her mother and father. I could see Mom's radiant smile as she tended to her beloved flowers, while Dad read in the shade of the old oak tree. I remembered how she called out to me, laughing as she asked for help with the flowers, telling me they were as beautiful as I was. I had rushed to her side, my heart bursting with happiness and energy, while Dad looked up from his book, watching us with such peaceful contentment. Back in the present, I held my father's hand, feeling how it had grown weaker with each passing day. With all the determination I could muster, I promised him I would protect everything, our name, our family's pride, no matter what happened. Dad smiled at me then, a smile full of pride and understanding. His voice was weak but filled with love and trust as he told me he believed in me, that I had inherited Mom's spirit and his determination. He assured me he knew I would protect our legacy. As night fell over our mansion, I had no idea that my real battle was just beginning. I steeled myself for whatever challenges lay ahead, armed with the determination I'd inherited from both my parents, completely unaware that I was about to face a war between betrayal and justice. In the hospital room, Dad lay in his bed, his body frail and his eyes tired, yet still filled with love. Amber and I stood on either side of him, holding his hands, trying to provide comfort in his final moments. The room was silent except for the beeping of medical equipment and his labored breathing. Dad's voice was weak but full of love as he told me, his precious daughter, to always stay strong. Through my tears, I gripped his hand tighter, promising him I would protect our family name and carry on his legacy. I told him how much I loved him. From the other side of the bed, Amber held his other hand, her face a mask of concern and anxiety. She told him not to worry, that we would take care of everything. Dad looked at us both with gentle eyes, starting to say something about the will, but his weakness overcame him. Before he could say anything more, he slowly closed his eyes and took his last breath, leaving the room in a deep, heavy silence. I stood there quietly crying, still holding his hand, feeling as if the world had stopped turning. I watched in shock as Amber threw an envelope of money onto the table, coldly telling me that my father was dead, the will was clear, and I had 2 weeks to leave. As I looked at the money in the envelope, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief surge through me. I couldn't believe she could be so cruel, but I knew I had to be strong, for myself and for Dad's memory. The money would only last about 2 months, but it was enough time to get back on my feet. With a heavy heart and tears in my eyes, I packed my belongings and left the mansion I had always called home. I found a small apartment, modest but comfortable, with white walls and old furniture that had a certain charm I grew to like. As I unpacked my few possessions, I tried to convince myself that this would be the place where I could start my new life, that things would get better. While I was moving in, I heard a knock at the door. Opening it, I found a young man with a friendly smile who introduced himself as John, my next-door neighbor. We shook hands, and I felt relieved to meet someone so kind. I managed a smile as I introduced myself, though I'm sure my eyes betrayed my sadness. John must have noticed because he started talking, telling me about the nearby university where he studied public administration. He suggested I consider enrolling, his eyes encouraging and warm. I sighed, feeling the need to tell him the truth about my situation, about losing Dad and being thrown out by my stepmother who had manipulated the will to take everything. John placed a compassionate hand on my shoulder and told me that studying at the university might be a good idea, not just for the education, but for the connections that could help me deal with my situation. His words resonated deeply within me, though I wrestled with doubt and fear about whether this was the right choice. I knew time was limited and I needed to decide quickly. With new determination, I chose to take the risk and enroll in the same department as John, using what little money I had left for tuition. I was scared and uncertain, but I was also determined to change my circumstances. Though I knew the path ahead would be difficult, I was ready to face the challenge, guided by Dad's memory and my promise to him. I felt my inner resolve strengthening as I promised Dad I would find a way to carry on his legacy and see justice done. When I started at the university's public administration department, I felt a mix of fear and excitement. The campus buzzed with energy, students rushing everywhere, and I realized this would be my new world. John, now both my neighbor and classmate, became a constant source of support. He assured me with a smile that I would love both the place and the classes as we walked through the department hallways together. I tried to sound confident when I told him I hoped so, admitting that despite my anxieties, I had a strong desire to learn and create change. Over the first few months in the department, John and I grew closer as friends. We studied together, exchanged ideas, and supported each other through long days and late nights. One rainy day in the library, I opened up to him about how much Dad's death and Amber's manipulation of the will still haunted me, how sometimes I felt like I was fighting a losing battle. John, always compassionate, took my hand and assured me that though things were tough, I was stronger for everything I'd experienced. He promised he would always be there for me. Then he shared his own struggles, telling me about his difficult childhood and how university had been his chance to change his life. His eyes shone with passion as he explained his desire to become someone who could help others live better lives. I felt a deep connection with John, realizing we were both on journeys of growth and overcoming challenges. I thanked him for being by my side, acknowledging that while we each had our own battles to fight, those struggles had made us stronger. 5 years flew by like a dream, and one day John and I found ourselves reminiscing at our favorite cafe near campus. John smiled as he reminded me of our desperate times during exam weeks, amazed that we were now so close to graduation. I couldn't help but smile too, remembering all the difficult moments and small victories we had shared. With a mix of nostalgia and excitement, I told him it felt like yesterday, all those sleepless nights and anxious moments, but now we were ready for the next chapter. When internship season arrived, I felt butterflies in my stomach. I confessed my fears to John about not finding a good internship placement. John, who was already working at a government agency, gave me one of his reassuring smiles and told me about an opening at his workplace. He offered to recommend me, confident that I would be a great addition to their team. I felt immediate relief wash over me, grateful for his trust and support. On my first day, John brought me to the government agency. He helped me feel comfortable, introducing me to his colleagues. Then he introduced me to Beth, describing her as a highly capable longtime employee. Beth, who carried herself with the confidence of a veteran, smiled warmly and extended her hand. She welcomed me kindly, explaining that their agency handled various inheritance and property issues, and that she held one of the most important positions there. As I was trying to adjust to my new workplace, a memory of my mother Crystal suddenly flooded back to me. I could see her warm smile as we sat in our kitchen while she prepared afternoon snacks. I remembered her words so clearly, telling me to always stay strong and fair, that even though the world could be cruel sometimes, justice and a strong heart would make the difference. She had tucked my hair behind my ear as she reminded me never to forget who I was or what truly mattered. I had been young and sensitive then, looking at her with such admiration. I had promised her, my eyes bright with conviction, that I would never forget. Coming back to the present, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. I knew there was a reason I was here. As days passed, I became increasingly efficient and dedicated in my work. John and Beth became my main allies, always ready to help and support me. I could feel my confidence growing day by day, as I realized I was learning so much. Though each day brought new challenges, I finally felt I was on the right path.
While Natalie immersed herself in her new position at the government agency, Amber continued to live a life of shameless luxury in the grand mansion. In her opulent world, mornings held no meaning as she rarely rose before noon, spending long hours lounging in silken sheets amid the splendor she had stolen. Her visits to her late husband's company were mere formalities, superficial checks to ensure her grip on power remained absolute. Gazing at her reflection in the ornate mirror of her luxurious bedroom, Amber's painted lips curved into a cruel smile as she imagined Natalie wandering lost and destitute. Basking in her false triumph, Amber felt invincible, certain she had outmaneuvered her stepdaughter and protected herself from any threat the young woman might pose. Intoxicated by her newfound power and wealth, she saw herself as untouchable, a queen in her stolen kingdom. A cold laugh echoed through her chambers as she mused how foolish Brian had been, never imagining she would claim everything for herself. Her days were filled with luxury and indulgence, built upon corrupted justice and shameless hedonism. In her gilded cage, she reveled in her victory, never suspecting that her carefully constructed world of privilege would soon begin to crumble.
I was far from defeated, despite facing betrayal at every turn. With my father's memory and my mother's teachings guiding me like a compass, I had found my path forward. The friendship with John and my new alliance with Beth gave me the strength and confidence to keep moving forward. Looking out the office window one day, I made a silent promise that I would overcome everything and see justice done, no matter how long it took. The first few months at the government agency were challenging, but I quickly proved myself. My dedication and intelligence became evident to everyone around me. No matter how complex the task, I tackled it with a determination that impressed both my supervisors and colleagues. I meticulously reviewed recent investigation documents, knowing that attention to detail was crucial. If there were any irregularities, I would find them. When I received news of my promotion, joy filled my heart. My supervisor Mark smiled warmly as he told me my work was exemplary and that I would be handling more important and complex investigations. I felt a mixture of pride and responsibility weighing on my shoulders as I promised him I would continue to do my best. My colleagues celebrated my promotion, acknowledging my hard work. They insisted the promotion was well-deserved, saying I worked harder than anyone else. During this time of success, I began developing a strong friendship with Beth. She was a confident and capable woman who never hesitated to offer advice and help. I truly believed I had found a genuine friend in the workplace, and I expressed my heartfelt gratitude for her support. Little did I know then that Beth was harboring secrets. One busy day, I noticed Beth receive a phone call that clearly made her nervous. She hurriedly told me she had to take care of something and would be right back. I didn't think much of it at the time, assuming it was just personal business. How wrong I was to dismiss those small warning signs.
In a secluded corner of the city, Beth met with Amber, her heart pounding beneath her professional exterior. The air grew thick with tension as Amber regarded Beth with the calculating smile of a predator eyeing its prey. With the authority of someone accustomed to wielding power, Amber demanded an update on the company's situation and confirmation that the will remained safely buried from any investigation. Beth felt ice course through her veins, yet maintained her composure as she assured Amber that everything was under control. She detailed how she had manipulated records to prevent any audit from uncovering their deception, confirming that payments continued as scheduled. Then came the moment that made Beth's heart nearly stop, Amber's casual mention of a new employee named Natalie. With a contemptuous smile playing across her perfectly painted lips, Amber revealed that Natalie was Brian's daughter. Beth felt as though the ground had disappeared beneath her feet as she realized the magnitude of her betrayal. She managed to stammer out her surprise at this revelation, though her mind was already racing with the implications. Amber's cold laugh echoed in the empty space as she dismissed any concerns about Natalie being a threat. With a dismissive wave of her manicured hand, she instructed Beth to continue keeping their secrets hidden. Guilt gnawed at her conscience, but Beth steeled herself to maintain the facade. She tried to convince herself she was doing the right thing, even as doubt poisoned her thoughts. Meanwhile, completely unaware of this web of deception, Natalie continued to place her absolute trust in her newfound friend, believing she had found an ally in her quest for justice.
I kept thinking how indispensable Beth had become, working together on various projects and believing I couldn't have made it this far without her help. John, always by my side, noticed how much I had grown through these challenges. One quiet night at the office while reviewing documents, I confided my growing suspicions about my father's company to John. Something felt terribly wrong. Amber rarely showed up there, and I sensed she was hiding something sinister. John agreed without hesitation that we needed to investigate deeper, assuring me we would uncover any problems that existed. The thought of investigating Dad's company stirred up a whirlwind of emotions inside me. I silently promised Dad that I would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. John stood firmly beside me, promising his support every step of the way. On the day of the audit, John and I arrived at Dad's company early in the morning, the weight of responsibility heavy on my shoulders. I told John with determination that we would uncover the truth today. Though the company looked impressive under Amber's management, my instincts told me something was very wrong. As we began examining documents and records for irregularities, I quickly discovered something disturbing. I showed John the mysterious transactions I'd found, money flowing into unidentifiable accounts. John analyzed the evidence and agreed it was definitely suspicious, emphasizing we needed to gather more proof. As we continued our investigation, I felt overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. This was far more serious than I'd imagined, and I knew I had to stay strong. Dad had trusted me. John must have sensed my distress because he offered words of encouragement, reminding me we were doing the right thing and that Dad would be proud. After a full day of auditing, we gathered all our evidence and decided to report our findings to Beth. I approached her with determination, explaining that we had found evidence of misappropriated funds and suspicious transactions in Dad's company. Beth carefully examined the documents and, masking her anxiety, stated in a professional tone that this was serious and required immediate action. Still trusting her completely, I felt relieved to have such a capable ally and thanked her sincerely. She maintained her businesslike demeanor while assuring me we were a team. The constant pressure of ongoing investigations and sleepless nights searching for truth began taking its toll on my health. One morning, feeling particularly exhausted and plagued by frequent headaches, I decided to seek medical help. I made an appointment with Dr. Holly, a trusted physician in the city. In her office, Dr. Holly greeted me with a warm smile and asked about my concerns, her eyes taking in my exhausted appearance. Fighting back tears, I confessed that I felt on the verge of a breakdown, overwhelmed by work stress, constant headaches, insomnia, and anxiety. Dr. Holly listened carefully to everything I said, taking detailed notes of my symptoms. I listened carefully as Dr. Holly explained how stress affects the body in many ways. She spoke with quiet authority about addressing my anxiety and improving my sleep, prescribing mild medication and emphasizing the importance of taking breaks from work. I nodded gratefully, feeling relieved that someone cared about my well-being. I told her she was right, I needed to stay healthy to continue my investigation. Then Dr. Holly mentioned something that caught my attention entirely. She told me she'd noticed some strange coincidences regarding my father's company, explaining that Beth, my colleague, was also her patient and seemed deeply involved in various crucial matters at my father's company. After the appointment, I couldn't shake Dr. Holly's words from my mind. Walking home, I kept wondering why Beth would be involved with my father's company and what I might have missed. Seeds of doubt began taking root, and I decided to watch Beth more carefully. A few days later, while working late at the office, I noticed Beth hurrying out with a suspicious look on her face. Following an instinct I couldn't ignore, I quietly followed her. She entered a quiet cafe and took a corner seat. Carefully staying out of sight, I moved close enough to hear her conversation. My blood ran cold as I recognized Amber's commanding voice, praising Beth for her work and ordering her to keep the will hidden from any audit. I must never learn the truth. In that moment, my world shattered around me. Beth had betrayed me, working with Amber all along to sabotage my efforts. With a heavy heart, I returned to the office, determined to confront Beth the next day. When morning came, I called Beth for a private meeting. In an empty conference room, with the door firmly closed, I confronted her about following her and overhearing her conversation with Amber. Through my tears, I demanded to know why she had betrayed my trust. The color drained from Beth's face as she realized she had been discovered. When she tried to explain, I cut her off. No explanation could justify her betrayal. Backed into a corner, Beth attempted to defend herself, claiming Amber had paid her handsomely to keep the will from being investigated. She insisted she hadn't known about my connection until recently, begging me to believe her. But I was beyond listening. I ordered her to leave, declaring our friendship over. As Beth left the room, I remained alone with my turbulent emotions. I told myself that though I never imagined such betrayal from someone I trusted, this would only make me stronger. John found me shortly after the confrontation, concern evident in his voice as he asked what had happened. I poured out everything about Beth's betrayal and how devastated I felt. Through my tears, I told him I didn't know who to trust anymore, but I refused to give up. John placed a comforting hand on my shoulder, promising we would expose Amber together. His warmth and support gave me strength, and I thanked him, knowing I couldn't have made it this far without him. We spent the whole night reviewing documents and planning how to build our case against Amber. A few days later, I led a small investigation at my father's company, tense but determined. I stood before my team, knowing this was the day we would finally uncover the truth. My colleagues showed their respect and trust in my leadership, one investigator assuring me they were ready to expose everything. A wave of pride and responsibility washed over me as I thanked them all and encouraged our joint effort. As we proceeded with the investigation, reviewing document after document, I felt a mix of anxiety and excitement churning inside me. Then suddenly, my heart nearly stopped. I had found something crucial. I called John over, my pulse racing as I showed him the evidence of the tampered will and how Amber had used Beth to prevent any investigation. John examined the documents and agreed this was the solid evidence we needed to prosecute Amber. A flood of emotions swept through me, relief, sadness, but above all, determination. I clutched the documents tightly, silently promising Dad we were close to the truth and would see justice done. Though the battle wasn't over, I knew I was on the right path to reclaiming justice and fulfilling Dad's legacy. After discovering the incriminating evidence, everything at the company changed dramatically. Beth was immediately fired for her involvement in the fraud. While John and I felt relieved to have uncovered the truth, we knew our next mission would be even more challenging, conducting a full audit of the mansion to completely expose Amber's true nature. I declared with unwavering determination that this was just the beginning, that Amber wouldn't escape this time. The preparation for the audit was intense. John and I spent hours verifying documents and gathering necessary evidence. I reminded John we needed to be meticulous, that we couldn't miss anything because the mansion must be full of secrets she had tried to hide. John understood the importance of this opportunity and assured me we were definitely getting closer to the truth. Though getting official permission for the audit wasn't easy, our solid evidence helped convince the authorities of the necessity. When John handed me the permission documents, telling me we were cleared for an early morning audit of the mansion tomorrow, I took a deep breath, feeling both tense and relieved. I gripped the permission papers tightly, telling John it was time for Amber to face her crimes. The next morning, before sunrise, I arrived at the mansion with the investigation team. The air was cold and thick with tension. I confirmed everyone was ready, emphasizing the need for accuracy and speed. John stood supportively by my side, confidently announcing we were ready to begin. As we entered, the mansion was eerily quiet. The dark hallways and empty rooms created an almost mystical atmosphere. John whispered that according to the servants, Amber was still sleeping in her bedroom. I nodded, feeling adrenaline course through my veins as I decided that's where we would go. When we reached Amber's bedroom door, it opened with a gentle push. There she was, sleeping in her bed, completely unaware of the chaos about to unfold. I approached her, filled with a mixture of anger and justice, and commanded her to wake up in a firm, confident voice. I told her she couldn't hide anymore, we were there to prove her crimes. I watched as Amber stirred in her bed, muttering incoherently, still believing she was in a nightmare. I stepped closer and spoke again, more firmly this time, telling her this was reality, her dream world was over and she needed to face the truth. Finally, Amber opened her eyes, frightened and confused. John calmly explained that we had official permission to audit the mansion and had found evidence of her fraud and embezzlement. Amber tried to maintain her composure, feigning innocence and telling us to search all we wanted, but I could see panic spreading across her face. As the investigation team began searching the house, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. I knew we were close to the truth now, there was no way Amber could escape. The servants' interviews only confirmed our suspicions. Suddenly, to everyone's surprise, Beth appeared at the mansion. John and I exchanged worried glances, fearing she might try to interfere. Despite my distrust, I decided to hear what she had to say. To our amazement, Beth revealed she had come to help. Through tears, she admitted she knew she'd lost our trust, but needed to confess everything. She couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I cautiously urged her to continue, keeping my voice steady. Beth took a deep breath and revealed everything: how Amber had paid her to prevent the will from being investigated, how they had manipulated records to appear legal. When Amber tried to escape, the investigation team quickly stopped her. I felt a mixture of relief and sadness hearing Beth's confession, knowing the truth was finally coming to light. The investigation team found irrefutable evidence of Amber's fraud and embezzlement, sealing her fate. I thought of Dad then, feeling overwhelmed with emotion as I realized we had finally achieved justice. John gave me a proud smile, telling me I'd done amazing work and it was almost over. Though I knew the battle wasn't completely won, I felt we'd taken a massive step forward. With nowhere left to run, Amber would have to face the consequences of her actions, and I could finally begin to reclaim Dad's legacy. Thanks to the evidence gathered during the audit, I quickly obtained an eviction order for Amber. The mountain of paperwork was exhausting and emotionally draining, but I remained determined to see justice done. As I signed the final papers at the law office, I knew I couldn't let Dad's legacy be tarnished any longer. When I submitted the documents to the judge, I felt a mix of relief and apprehension. On the day of Amber's eviction, I waited at the mansion for the authorities to arrive. Amber, still unable to accept what was happening, looked at me with desperate eyes. I watched as Amber begged, her voice trembling with fear and desperation, asking me to find another way, pleading not to be evicted. Maintaining my composure, I told her calmly that she'd had her chance to change, but chose to deceive, lie, and steal instead. Now it was time to face the consequences of her actions. As Amber was escorted from the mansion, crying and pleading for mercy, I felt conflicting emotions wash over me. Watching someone's downfall was painful, but I knew there was no other choice. Justice had to be served. After Amber's crimes were exposed, my life forever changed, but so did hers. Through the legal proceedings, I learned that Amber's fraud extended far beyond just the will. She had been embezzling company funds for years. The evidence was overwhelming: offshore accounts, falsified documents, and a web of lies that had grown more complex with each passing year. The trial lasted 3 months, each day revealing new depths of her deception. In the courtroom, I saw a different Amber, no longer the confident socialite, but a broken woman in prison attire. She was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and document forgery. The newspapers covered her fall from grace extensively, from mansion to prison cell, from society parties to prison yard time. I heard from mutual acquaintances that she struggled to adjust to prison life, her privileged background making the transition especially difficult. Her expensive jewelry and designer clothes were replaced with standard prison uniforms, her gourmet meals with cafeteria food. The last I heard, she was teaching basic accounting to fellow inmates, an ironic twist considering how she had used those skills for fraud. She wrote me a letter once, expressing remorse, but I couldn't tell if she was truly sorry or just sorry she got caught. The hardest part wasn't seeing her punished, it was realizing that throughout their marriage, she had been deceiving my father, who had trusted her completely. Sometimes at night, when I walk through the mansion my father built, I wonder if Amber ever truly cared about any of us, or if it was all just an elaborate act. Justice was served, but the wounds of betrayal take longer to heal than any court sentence. The company's reputation took some hits initially when the scandal broke, but our transparency in handling the aftermath helped restore public trust. I made sure every victim of her schemes was compensated, even if it meant using my own inheritance. Some people questioned why I didn't just walk away from it all, but I knew I had to honor my father's legacy by making things right. The other day, I received notice that Amber has been a model prisoner, potentially eligible for parole in 7 years. Part of me hopes she's using this time to reflect and truly change, but experience has taught me to be cautiously optimistic. The most valuable lesson from all this wasn't about justice or revenge, it was about the importance of truth and integrity, values my father had tried to instill in me all along. Looking back now, I realize that Amber's downfall wasn't just about the money or the fraud, it was about the fundamental difference between building something real and creating an illusion. After Amber left, I began reorganizing and managing the mansion, walking through empty hallways filled with memories of happier times with my parents. Every room, every piece of furniture, every detail was now under my care. I sighed, telling myself it was time for a fresh start, to cleanse away all the negative energy Amber had left behind. The next step was taking over the family company. As I entered the headquarters, feeling the weight of responsibility, I silently promised Dad I would run the company the right way. I began reviewing employee lists to identify Amber's accomplices. Those involved in covering up her crimes were dismissed for their misconduct. The reactions varied among the staff. Some felt relieved to see a fair and firm leader, while others feared change. One longtime employee smiled genuinely, telling me how glad they were to have me in charge, believing the company would improve. Feeling their support, I promised we would work together to restore the company's integrity. After reorganizing management, I decided to transform the mansion into a community center and craft school in Dad's memory. I believed this place should serve the community and bring happiness to people. I hired architects and designers to reimagine the mansion's spaces. I enthusiastically explained my vision for classrooms, craft workshops, and gathering spaces, a place where people could learn and grow. As I reviewed the blueprints, I kept telling myself this project had to be perfect. When the pressure and stress began affecting my health again, I returned to Dr. Holly. In her office, I confessed how exhausted I felt, how the weight of responsibility seemed overwhelming. Dr. Holly listened carefully and offered wise advice, suggesting I delegate work and find trustworthy people to help run the company. Perhaps John would be perfect for that role. I considered her advice, realizing John had always been by my side and would make an excellent addition to the management team. I thanked Dr. Holly sincerely for her guidance. While planning the company's reconstruction, I also reconnected with old friends who offered their support. John and Dr. Holly became invaluable during this process. I told John truthfully that I couldn't have accomplished any of this without him. John smiled, taking my hand and promising he would always be there for me. Dr. Holly continued providing support, helping me manage stress and pressure. She reminded me that while the community needed me, I also needed to take care of myself. I felt deeply grateful for having such dedicated and supportive friends in my life. I smiled as I thanked Dr. Holly, promising to remember her advice. With John and Dr. Holly's help, I began receiving support from the community. People saw in me a fair and determined leader who genuinely cared about everyone's happiness. When a resident thanked me for everything I was doing for the community, I was deeply moved. As I hugged them, I realized their words gave me strength and confirmed I was on the right path. Finally, I decided to make my partnership with John official. I knew with certainty that he was the perfect person to help run the company and ensure all our projects succeeded. Looking into his eyes with determination, I told him I had something important to discuss. I explained how he had always been by my side, trustworthy and supportive, and that I wanted him to help manage the company. There was no one better suited. John smiled, surprised and honored by my proposal. He eagerly accepted, promising we would work together to make the company thrive and preserve Dad's legacy. I felt such relief and satisfaction in that moment. Together, I told him, we could accomplish anything. This new partnership made me feel ready to face any challenge. Both the company and community center flourished, and I had true friends supporting me every step of the way. I looked to the future with hope and determination. I did it, Dad, I thought to myself, feeling waves of satisfaction wash over me. John, as co-manager, brought innovation and efficiency to both me and the company. Together we implemented new strategies to revitalize the business. I thanked him with a smile for always believing in me. Our relationships grew stronger, built on mutual respect and admiration. Even Bess found redemption after revealing everything about Amber. She dedicated herself to helping at the community center, trying to make amends for the damage she had caused. One day, she approached me, acknowledging she could never fully compensate for what she'd done, but wanting to help build something positive. Looking back on all the challenges and victories, I felt ready to overcome anything the future might hold.